We've got Alison Beath to talk to us on the front line, biosecurity in the Waiouru military training area. And if you catch up with her during lunch and want to have a chat, she does have 3 lovely dogs at home. Cool.
Mark just hit me up in the morning tea break, said, "What's a fun fact about yourself?" So I just blurted out, "I've got 3 dogs." So it doesn't seem that relevant now, but anyway. So kia ora tātou. Thank you for the introduction, Mark. I'm part of a small but passionate team of 4 people working as land managers for the New Zealand Defence Force. And our roles are heavily focused on ensuring that the New Zealand Defence Force has got sustainable land management. And as part of that, our roles do a lot of pest control and also managing biodiversity across the 81,000 hectares of New Zealand Defence Force administered land. And that's everything from the Kaipara bombing range right up in the north, right down to Tekapo military training area right down in the south. But in these, should we call them volatile times that we live in, you could be forgiven for thinking that pest control and managing biodiversity are hardly high on the list of the New Zealand Defence Force's list of priorities. In fact, you may even be wondering what the New Zealand Defence Force is doing at a biosecurity conference at all. But stay with me. And let's transport ourselves to the eastern foothills of Mount Ruapehu in the central North Island, to a beautiful, unique and remote place that is home to the Waiouru military training area. Now, the Waiouru military training area is an absolute world-class training facility, to the degree that many overseas armies and militaries also come to the Waiouru military training area to train as well. There's several reasons why it's an absolute world-class training facility. Firstly, because of its size. So it's 63,000 hectares, which is a really large piece of land. But we need that amount of land to be able to carry out the tactical manoeuvres that the military needs to train, and also the safety range that we need to be able to fire the big artillery, which is about 10 kilometres with the New Zealand Defence Force, but up to 30 kilometres when the Singaporean Army comes to visit. Secondly is that, as you're probably well aware, Waiouru can be cold, very cold. It can also be hot and dry and windy, and so it actually creates a really hardcore training environment for our military. But the third and probably the most important reason why it's a world-class training facility is at Waiouru you can find just about the full representation of habitat types and landforms that we would expect our military, our soldiers, to go and fight wars in overseas. For example, we've got rolling hills, and we've got sweeping valleys, and we've got dramatic cliffs and steep gorges as well. And a huge diversity in habitat types, so a big mosaic of wetlands with tarns and seepages and bogs, big open areas of tussock land, many forest remnants, lots of manuka shrubland, even a lake for the Navy to train in, and even a sandy desert. So yeah, pretty much the full range of habitat types that we might be expected to go and fight wars in overseas. Now, military training areas internationally cover an estimated 5 to 6% of the world's surface. And I think it's a really interesting point that military training areas can actually be outstanding wilderness areas. And this is because they are large uninhabited areas, and contrary to what you might think, they can be generally undisturbed areas as well. And they've been protected from development for a long period of time. So, for example, at Waiouru, if it wasn't set aside for military training, quite a lot of it would likely be farmland now. So your military training areas internationally can be real biodiversity hotspots. It's really interesting that with the training areas in the United States, about a quarter of all the endangered species that are found in the United States are actually found in the training areas in the United States. Plenty of other examples internationally as well. For example, fun fact, the first wolf pack found in Germany in 100 years was found in a training area in Germany. And a big training area in Australia called Shoalwater Bay is home to the endangered marine mammal, the dugong. And Waiouru is no different. So a real standout feature for us is our plants. We've got many species of rare and unusual plants, and many of those species have their only known North Island location in Waiouru. But we've also got long-tailed bats throughout the training area and the forest remnants there. We've got breeding banded dotterels in the volcanic dune fields, also breeding falcons throughout the training area too, several species of gecko and skink, the lovely giant Poelephanta land snail, the carnivorous land snail, even an elegant cramped moth. There's only 2 known locations for that species, and one is along the desert road in the training area, and the beautiful red mistletoe as well in the forest remnants. So we've just heard how Waiouru is a really large area with diverse habitats and landforms, and it is these natural features that make it a real standout training area. And so yes, it is a real priority for the military to protect those natural assets through biosecurity. So we'll now just have a look at some of those biosecurity programs. So we've got a very long and rich history of wilding conifer control, as Craig talked about a bit earlier this morning. So in the 1920s, we had a neighbouring plantation forest that was planted that had a lot of contorta in it that spread out into the surrounding landscape. In the 1930s, contorta was planted in shelter belts around Waiouru camp. And then in the 1940s, unfortunately, we had an erosion control planting trial using contorta, and that was, they planted about 40,000 young contorta there. And that was part of the post-war sort of get the country moving again efforts. The result was by the 1960s, contorta was absolutely out of control in the training area. So there was a range of views at the time with the Army. Some of the Army personnel really liked the contorta. They liked the fact that it provided shelter and screening around the camp and habitat for the soldiers to train in as well. But a particularly perceptive colonel and forward-thinking colonel at the time, he actually stated that the contorta at Waiouru was a real threat to the Army's existence at Waiouru. And that's because it had got so thick in places that it was actually stopping the tanks from doing their manoeuvre training that they needed to do. And I like that photo because behind the soldiers there, there's a whole lot of dead contorta carcasses, but it was actually a lot thicker than that in places. So we've had many control methods that we've trialled over the years. One of the earlier, more interesting ones was burning. That method wasn't without its problems, though. One day the smoke was so thick from one of the burning exercises that it went over the desert road and caused a traffic fatality. It was also a really expensive method as well. Back then there was sheep and cattle grazing in that particular area, so before the burning operations they'd have to muster out the sheep and the cattle and the kamanawa horses as well. So nowadays we're still dealing with the problems of the past, with contorta still throughout the training area. And it is our biggest and most expensive control program that we're currently running. And we're still finding mature contorta hiding in places like around camp. Horizons found that mature tree there on the left just a few years ago, hiding within camp there, and within shelter belts as well. And there's many other plant pests in the training area as well that threaten the military training values that we've got many different control programs on. We've got broom and gorse and lupin, and Craig again talked about that in his presentation earlier. But we also control a bit of Spanish heath and alder and viper's bluegrass and alder and crack willow and grey willow and even marram grass. Marram grass was planted many years ago next to the desert road to stop sand blowing across the road. So yeah, a long list of pest plants that we're dealing with, and in more recent years we've added animal pests to the list of enemies as well. Now the forest remnants throughout the training area are really valued by the military for training. They're just really great areas to be able to do what they call closed canopy training in. But possums along with deer are a threat to the forest remnants. Possums also, of course, are a predator of the Poelephanta snails that I love so much. We've managed possums since the 1990s. A lot of it's been through bait station work. All those red dots on the map there are the various bait stations we've had in place. But the training area is really large and it's got lots of inaccessible and remote areas that we just can't get to. So we had the concern that possums were starting to get really out of control in the training area, particularly in those areas. And yes, monitoring confirmed our worst fears. So those of you that are familiar with the residual trap catch, RTC monitoring, that's a whole lot of RTC possum monitoring lines that we put in place for the training area. Everything in blue or red is far too high, with everything in red being over 20% RTC. So that's incredibly high possum numbers, considering you want a possum density of between 2 to 3% to protect mistletoe. So yes, Houston, we've got a problem. So our solution was to secure funding for the first aerial 1080 operation done in the training area in over 20 years. Many of you would have planned aerial 1080 operations before, and you'll be well aware of the restrictions that are in place around when you can do the operation. You're not only waiting for a good weather window, you're also not able to potentially drop it in the weekends or during school holidays. But try organising a 1080 operation in a busy military training area in the subalpine environment in the Central Plateau. We not only had to try to navigate around the weather, but also trying to find a time in the training area where they weren't doing live firing operations was actually really challenging. Another challenge was that the training area is used quite a bit by military working dogs and also police dogs for training exercises, so that was an added risk that we really had to manage. And of course the Kamanawa horses. So with every single horse in that training area just about being named and known, it would have been a bit of a PR nightmare if we'd poisoned them accidentally through 1080. So we just had to manage that risk as well and have bait stations in place where the horses were. So we're not only interested in protecting the forest remnants in the training area, we've got a lot of open habitat as well throughout the training area. We've got open tussock land and we've got herb fields as well, and that habitat's really important for us to protect too. And hares are incredibly common in the training area and are a big risk to those sort of areas. They threaten herb fields, and also their impacts are really significant up at high altitude habitat, of course, which we have a lot of. Hare control can be really tricky though. They don't like taking poison bait. They bounce back really quickly from a one-off control operation. And the areas that they're found up in high altitude areas can be hard to access on foot. So our solution is to control them using a helicopter. And I've got to admit, before I joined the Defence Force and I heard that the Defence Force was controlling hares by shooting them with helicopters, I thought that was quite, I suppose, extravagant. But it works really well for us. Our monitoring has shown that if we reduce hare numbers really, really low in a season, it takes 2 seasons for their numbers to bounce back, so their numbers are suppressed for that time, which means we can do hare control on a 3-yearly rotation. We prioritise the areas based on high biodiversity value areas, and we shoot the zone an area, really, really get to really low numbers, 2 to 5 times. That just gives a chance for those plant communities to recover. So deer are in very high numbers through the training area as well, and they threaten a variety of habitats that are there. And we're really interested in integrated pest management, so that we're not just interested in controlling just possums or hares, but all the full suite of browsers that threaten the training area. We've got 3 species of deer, mostly sika deer for you keen hunters out there, some red and the occasional fallow as well. And recreational hunting is a really prized activity in the training area, with hunters putting in for ballots for weekends and holidays to be able to do that. And they removed 1,200 deer from the training area last year, which has doubled in the last decade. But yeah, we know deer are incredibly high numbers in the training area. We put in place some formal monitoring through FPI, fecal palate indexing lines, essentially counting poo along 150-metre transects. And yes, it confirmed what we could see with our own eyes, incredibly high deer numbers throughout the training area. Everything in blue, orange and red is very high. A couple of transects that only 150 metres long, they had in excess of 1,000 poos along those transects. So yeah, very high numbers. So it's early days, but we've just started an aerial deer culling trial. And we've just chosen 3 areas where we shoot them from the helicopter, and it's proven to be really successful so far. So reducing the numbers by about 70 to 80% in those areas. Our early learnings was that block size was really important. So having too small a block size that you're shooting, reinvasion just happened far too fast. So big area was really important. And now to another large ungulate that browses plants. I've already mentioned the Komanawa horses, but they've numbered up to 1,800 horses in the training area previously. Some of you may have worked with them through their long and rich history of management. They're managed with a joint management agreement between DOC, New Zealand Defence Force, and horse preservation groups. The horse management plan is all around keeping the horses in the more modified southern part of the training area and keeping them out of the more ecologically fragile areas. And there's annual rehoming musters where the horses go to new homes. And in future years, we're hoping that, well, we already are trialling a contraceptive vaccine. We're hoping that that's really going to work well for us in the future. And just to quickly mention the other pests we're working on as well. So aerial pig control, rabbits through pindone control. There's urban pest control going on in Waiouru camp as well. We've removed 500 possums from within camp. They're hiding out in all the exotic trees there. Magpie control, horizons do rook control, and a feral cat control as well around camp. And just finally, some acknowledgements. So the fight against pests needs many soldiers, and we are lucky to be surrounded by an absolute army of entities who are working on pest control on the surrounding land, or research institutes that are doing pest control work to help support us. So that creates a really large landscape of pest control, biosecurity work in the larger landscape of the Central Plateau. So kia ora.